call me a god. You call me a god. You call me a god. You call me a god. Let's go.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Kentucky Atheist. I'm Joe. This is the Grateful to Know God's broadcast. Today, I've got Dr. Kipp Davis hanging out. What's up?
Hey man, it's good to meet you.
Yeah,
It's nice to be here. I think your intro kind of slays, which is pretty cool. I like it.
yeah. Jess actually does a lot of the art and intro stuff
Oh,
and
does
all
she?
that, and
Yeah,
she does an amazing job.
yeah, man.
We've got like different intros for all of our shows, and they're all just great. And she'll send me something and she'll be like, "What do you think of this?" And I'm like, "It's the most awesome thing I've ever seen." Like, yeah, but she does a great job. Thanks for coming and hanging out, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
We crossed paths a couple times, like through chat and on streams and things, but like never got to really talk or meet each other. And I'm glad to have you come hang out. The uh, I think probably most everybody that comes in will probably know who you are and stuff. But just in case, a little background of who you are, what you do.
For the stragglers, yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is Kipp Davis. I'm a biblical scholar and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls. I have a YouTube channel. I'm trying to write a book. And well, actually, I mean, I'm getting close to finishing the book, and I do courses online on the Bible and biblical studies, and I'm going to be starting a Hebrew course here. This seems to be the shiny new toy is Hebrew courses, and I'm usually late to the punch on just about everything. So
I was actually, I mean, this is something I just talked about last stream. Is for a while now, I've been trying to like find a way to like learn some of the Hebrew and stuff to get a bit of a better idea of the context of things.
I'm working with my friend and colleague Dr. Josh over at Digital Hammurabi, and we do a lot of things together. But that's I mean that's one of the things that I think we're trying to do. I think that we can do is to make this accessible, and what something that you're gonna notice. I think this is very telling, is in the spaces where I tend to go on the internet, on YouTube and in social media. I encounter people like you who are like, I, I feel like I need to know more about this. Uh, it's interesting to me that in the apologetic spaces that I creep, or maybe troll, maybe trolls a better a better word for it, but in those apologetic spaces, nobody's asking to learn the original languages. Nobody's offering to teach the original languages. And this is something that Josh and I are trying to do, uh, to make it as affordable as possible. I mean, you can go to university and spend thousands of dollars, right, learning these arcane languages that, are, let's be honest, you're never really going to use apart from, you know, this sort of niche interest.
Well,
Uh, it but I think if that's something that we can make available to more people, that just helps everybody. And
yeah,
we're
yeah. I think like, I mean, for me, I want to be able to, whenever I talk about these things, talk about it from a more informed position. I mean,
hmm
that's I don't want to look stupid when I get on here and have a conversation with someone, And I mean, many times, I mean, not that I care, I look stupid all the time, but I mean, many times, like, I, whenever I'm doing a video or putting something together, I'll go look at like what was the Hebrew for this and stuff, just so I'm like, and I'll get some, review on it or whatever that tells me what the context and things was in the Hebrew, so I can be sure, did they consider this to be more like poetry? Was it, how was this written originally? And I think that I think the atheist community values that a lot more than the theist community in many cases. Not all, obviously,
You're
but
not wrong. You're not wrong. I'm impressed by the appetite of our community to dig in and to do the hard work and
well,
to
I
actually
mean,
learn, right?
yeah, I mean, and one of the things I talked about with a few people, first of all, something you mentioned is when I was like, hey, I'm going to have Dr. Kipp Davis come on and talk, and they were like, is Josh coming with him? Is Dr. Josh coming too?
He's my
And I was
spirit
like,
animal.
I was like, I haven't spoke to him. I know they're good friends and stuff, and maybe we'll work on that, but not yet. No. Um, but also, I mean, I had some questions and things that, of course, I want to pick your brain about
Sure.
because you're a great person to ask those questions to. I may not. It's hard to come across somebody that I can say that I know for sure the answer they're going to give me is comes from a place where they've studied it to an extent that you have. Like so. Um, and some of the stuff I've heard you talk a little bit on before, but um, they're probably softball questions for you, but they're questions of things that come up often for having conversations in the atheist community, things that come up a lot, and I felt like anyway are things that are be a little easier to understand, and
Yeah.
we'll get into those in just a minute. The I I think the last time I seen you was well, I'd seen you on your channel, of course, but I've seen you over on Bad Science Sunday with Maya Atkinson, and isn't that a fun show?
That's
Uh,
that's a Sunday night staple for me now.
yeah, yeah. Uh, uh, oh, there's Maya in chat actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, um, yeah. One of my favorite things to watch if I can stay awake,
It's
and
just fun.
I'm old
I,
now, so
yeah,
I fall asleep early
right.
sometimes.
Hey,
But
can I
yeah.
can I just say something about something someone said in the chat here? Nitty made a comment about if I hear one more slavery stream, I'm gonna lose it. And I felt like I have to say something about this because Josh and I uh, we worked pretty hard on this video that aired on Pelagia's channel just around Christmas time. It's 3 hours long. Excuse me. Paul tells me that it's not the longest video that he's ever done, but it's close. But in our opinion, it's definitive. It's easily the most comprehensive response on YouTube to the question of slavery in the Bible, and that's all due respect too. We did a panel a couple of years ago with other experts on this topic, but it's one of these things, right? That keeps coming back. We've and it continues to be irritating to us that you know it's if apologists want to continue to promote these tropes, then deal with the evidence. Like, we've got an entire catalog of evidence there. It's like an encapsulation of everything that Josh has been writing for the last couple of years in his books. Sorry, I just had to
No,
say that.
no. I think that I think that that's awesome that you did that, and also I think that there is a lot of people who spend a lot of time covering that subject. on the surface level of it
Hmm.
anyway. And I think that I've never really I've talked about that whenever certain things come up in conversation, but I don't know that I've really ever done a show or stream focusing on that. Um, I don't. It's not. I mean, of course, there's like moral implications and all that stuff, but it's just not the. I don't know. It's not a go-to thing for me. But again, I don't spend a whole lot of time just arguing with theists either. I don't.
Right.
You know. Um, the One of the things you brought up that you've studied a lot is the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this question actually comes from the audience. Ember asked me to pass this one by you, and she said it's not what are the Sea Scrolls, but why are the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what's the importance of that, and what kind of the background of that.
Oh, oh my gosh, right? Um, so that's, I mean, there's a lot of things that I can say. And I have a tendency to start talking and then just never shut up about this topic. So I'm gonna try and keep this manageable. But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, there was a biblical scholar and archaeologist by the name of William Foxwell Albright who wrote when this news hit the news wire that this was the most important discovery related to biblical studies of all time. And I don't have the direct quote in front of me. And this was at a point in time when the just after the first discoveries were made. And the first discoveries comprised of only 7 documents, 7 manuscripts. In the intervening several years, that number has expanded to the point now that the Dead Sea Scrolls comprise literally tens of thousands of individual document fragments that scholars have reconstructed into at least 900 individual manuscripts. And the reason, in the first place, the reason this is significant is because prior to the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we had almost no direct textual information about the shape of the Hebrew text of the Bible prior to manuscripts that were medieval. The earliest copy of the Hebrew scriptures was in codices like the Leningrad Codex dating to the 10th century, or the Aleppo Codex, which is a little bit earlier than that, but incomplete. Like there's many folios of it missing. So this was immediately recognized as just an incredibly important find because it provided a window into the shape of Hebrew scriptures at the time of Jesus or thereabouts. So the scrolls themselves date to between 200 to 300 BCE. And yeah, I'm saying that for the haters. Lots of people get really irritated when I say BCE and CE. So, they date to between, possibly very late 3rd, but definitely early 2nd century BCE to around the time of the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are around 200, maybe 250 individual copies of things we identify as so-called biblical texts. That's texts that appear in our modern Bibles. But there's a ton of other literature in there, which attests to, I think, the religious cultural shape of Judaism at this pivotal time. And it also provides really, really important evidence to us about how ancient Jews, early Jews, were reading their scriptures, um, and even into this question of scripture itself. What is it? How do we recognize their understanding of this? So it's, it's, you can say these texts all appear in the Bible, therefore they're, scriptures. These are texts that Jesus quoted. These are texts that the rabbis later understood to be sacred, but within the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, at a time that was before any of this concern regarding the shape of your sacred of the sacred canon of texts ever. This is before anyone was asking these sorts of questions. So it's opened the way to thinking about, I think, just the textual shape of sacred literature uh, in Palestine more generally. Maybe a good way to illustrate this is through an example that I used in a video, actually, that was just published last week on Rationality Rules, Stephen Woodford's channel, where I talked a little bit about a really impressive manuscript in the scrolls called the Temple Scroll. It's the largest of all the Dead Sea Scrolls. It measures over 8 meters. Sorry for you Americans, that's like, what is that? That's like 20, 24, 25 feet,
Yeah,
thereabouts.
yeah.
It's not complete. Like, we don't have the whole thing. So it was larger than that. It's mostly intact. But this document is uh, it's like a rewriting of significant portions of the biblical book of Deuteronomy, but pretty extensively rewritten. There's new information included in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's missing, working towards this rather specific theological agenda. And then the reason it's called the Temple Scroll is because a significant part of this text is fixated on what the new celestial temple of Jerusalem is going to look like in the last days. It's this new temple that was going to replace the old corrupt temple. One of the remarkable things about this text is that when Yagel Yadin, who did the original work on this, when he first saw it and he first started writing about it, he called it a wild Pentateuch, meaning that it's really similar to the Pentateuch, but it's not. It's clearly not the same thing, right? But then I think one of the really remarkable things about it is that where you see the book of Deuteronomy making this claim to have been written by Moses. It's a pseudepigraphic claim. It's an invented idea that Moses wrote this text. Where you see that, the Temple Scroll has kind of taken this to another level. And the Temple Scroll is all written in the first person, and it's written in the first person from the very mouth of Yahweh himself. So, like, this document purports to be the Word of God. Now, I ask you, is this scripture to the readers of this text in the first century BC, the first century CE? Like, are they, when they look at this and it says, I, Yahweh, am telling you to do this, like, is that an even more vaunted claim than anything we see anywhere in the Bible? And then what do you do with that?
All right.
So
So
I hope that kind of answered your question, Ember.
the follow up to it. Why were the scrolls hidden, and what was the goal of hiding them, I guess.
Okay. What was the goal of these people?
Yeah.
So I think there are 11 caves in the area around the site of Qumran, which is understood by archaeologists. This is about 20, 25 kilometers um, southeast. Yes, southeast of Jerusalem, thereabouts on the western shore of the Dead Sea. Sorry, I'm just going to turn the ringer off here. On the western shore of the Dead Sea, and these people are identified as most like a group of Jewish people we know as the Essenes, and as near as we can tell, they were taking very seriously a mandate to go and live out in the wilderness and prepare themselves for the last days, for the coming of God, when he was going to finally kill all the Romans and cleanse the land of impurity and institute his holy kingdom. So these people were waiting, and they were writing and collecting literature. They were probably an elite priestly group. They probably had means, because it seems like a lot of them were very highly educated, highly literate. So that's what they were doing. The 11 caves themselves, I think, have different functions, and I think it's important to point out as well that I think there's some active dispute and debate even about how closely some of these caves are related to the site and to this sect. So, some of them may be, because there's literally thousands of caves that honeycomb the cliffs on the western side of the Dead Sea there. It's possible, it seems likely actually, that people fleeing Jerusalem as the Romans were coming in and destroying the city might have just stopped in some of these caves to wait things out, might have stashed some of their valuable documents in some of these caves. So I think it's important to kind of qualify that we're not. I tend to think most of the stuff there belongs to these people, to the Essenes. I think there's some room for some conversation about a little bit of it, though. And not all the caves are exactly the same in terms of their profile either. Caves 1 and Cave 11, for example, had a lot of pottery in them. Lots of the documents were stored in jars. And I'm partial to the idea that these might have been more similar in function to something like a Geniza, which is how do I put it? Within later Jewish tradition, because sacred texts were deemed too important to just discard of and destroyed, they were retired and respectfully buried, for lack of a better term. I think there's a possibility that a couple of these caves might have just been repositories for old, worn out manuscripts that people weren't using anymore. Cave 4, which is the closest cave to the site, and probably the most important because it contained the most, far and away, the most documents. There's over 550 individual scrolls that were in this one cave. It's a man-made cave, which is really important. There are divots and man-made holes in the walls on the cave that look like they were probably used to support shelving. Our interpretation of this is more in line with like a library. Like this is where they kept texts that they held on to, and that they that they read and learned and wrote on a regular basis. So there's a variety of different things going on here, but it's abundantly clear that they had this rather particular understanding of their ancient traditions and scriptures as coded coded texts informing them about things that were currently taking place and what were about to take place. And they use these texts too, to inform them on their own religious practices and observances. And it prompted an astonishing amount of reflection. I mean, most of the texts in the Dead Sea Scrolls are collections of literature just reflecting back on what's going on in the Bible. So I hope that's satisfactory.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were believed to be placed there like sometime well after the sacking of the Jewish temple, like in the
Right around the time. So,
right.
and I think this is and some qualification here too, right? Like for a long time, scholars assumed that because I'll say something like they're all really fragmentary and badly damaged. In a lot of the manuscripts, you can actually see like clean cuts, like just right across, as if someone came in with like a sword and was just hacking these scrolls to pieces. So for a long time, the idea was that people just threw this stuff in these caves and ran to get away from the encroaching Romans at the time of around 70. And that's a large part of why the terminus ad quem, the latest date that used to be ascribed to a lot of these manuscripts was 70 AD, 70 CE, when the Romans came through this area. Now, I think that that's maybe too simplistic an explanation for everything there. It seems that they were, like I said with regards to things like Cave 4 or even Caves 1 and Cave 11, that they were using these locations as for other means than just to hide their manuscripts. Or I think especially with Cave 4, I don't know that this was a hiding place so much as it was just their active repository for these manuscripts.
Yeah. The so they had this, and something that I've talked about here just not too long ago, I guess. They had to there seemed to be this idea though that Jesus was coming back to lead them into battle, right? Like
The Christians?
yeah, the to save them from the Romans. Is that going is that too far?
So I think I think one of the things, so now we're talking about something a little bit different here now, I think, because in the first place, it's important to point out as well, there is no direct relationship between the texts and the community who wrote and collected them at Qumran and the early Christians or Jesus's movement. So, but the situation at the time of Jesus was this, like it was this climate of really high tension, and you get a strong sense of this if you read some of the work of Josephus when he talks about the lead up to the Jewish war and what things were like in Jerusalem and in the region. So there was an ongoing apocalyptic fervor, I think, that was pretty widespread. And this was the idea that the Jewish people were frustrated and tired of Roman occupation. They were frustrated by Roman taxation, and they were really, really frustrated by how deeply embedded the Herodians were to the Roman state. They felt under pressure in terms of increasing Hellenization in their culture and in their own institutions, and this created kind of a fervor and an expectation that the Messiah was going to come and rescue them from the Romans, and they understood this to be a human military figure who was
Yeah.
literally going to lead armies. Now, some of this, I think, a lot of this developed over a long period of time. So by the time the by the time of Herod, it's already to this point where, while it's still, I think, very much a military expectation, it starts to get mixed in with a lot of cosmic ideology. The Messiah, as far as the writers and the collectors of the scrolls were concerned, for example, was kind of a cosmic figure, who was going to, you know, lead armies of angels in battle against the Romans. So I think that's probably the starting point for understanding who Jesus was and what he was doing. I'm of the opinion that we really don't know a lot about who Jesus really was and what he was really doing. I think the best guesses, though, are that he was part of this apocalyptic expectation. And because he was executed by the Romans, specifically for sedition, also probably suggests that at least his opponents understood him to be mounting some sort of rebellion, or some sort of yeah, it was threatening to the Roman state. So but that's, I don't know that we can say a lot more about
Right.
who he actually was and what he was actually doing, right?
Well, I would say we can't really say much that he was, but that's neither here nor there, and nor do I think it really matters. I think the character is probably mythological, and whether the person was or not doesn't really matter. The um, Going back
I think
though
that's fair.
to Judaism,
Hmm.
for the other Abrahamic religions to be true, it's required that Judaism be true, right? Like they they kind of they all rely on those things being factual events, Moses and all those other things.
Possibly. I think possibly. I know a lot of. I mean, I know a lot of. It's part of the occupational hazard is that most of my colleagues in the field of biblical studies are Jews and Christians. Um, and sincere, devoted Jews and Christians who also don't take uh, the same sort of confessional approach to the history and the literature that I think we're accustomed to in the evangelically saturated United States, or where I am, even in
Yeah.
Canada, right? Like, so, I get what you're saying. I hesitate to say that it's a requirement, because people do figure out how to, um, I guess, I mean, what's
Carry
the word I'm
picket.
looking for here? They do, sure.
Yeah.
Um, but I think there's I think we kind of have a special brand of Christianity here in North America, which is fairly unique compared to a lot of the rest of the world. And it's fairly recent too. Like a lot of this kind of stuff, this insistence on an historical Moses and a 6,000 year timeline to creation, or even things like the strict measure of biblical, what's the word, inerrancy. Like, these are actually fairly new ideas. They're only a couple hundred years old. which seems like an eternity to us, I guess. But in the grand scheme of thing, there are older older Christian traditions, which I would say have a more nuanced approach to the relationship between history and their religious convictions. And various people will develop strategies of getting. I used to do this all the time. I spent most of my academic career as a committed Christian, and I still as a committed Christian, I still thought the virgin birth was bullshit, and I didn't think that there was an exodus, and I embraced evolution, and I understood the Bible to be a very human book. So it's but there certainly is a strain, right? There's a strain of Christianity, and we're kind of saturated in it, and it feels dominant. It feels like this is just the way everybody thinks about this stuff and has to think about this stuff. I honestly, my hope, uh, is to help. I'd love it to help Christians to take a step back and say, listen, you don't have to immerse yourself in the bullshit to continue, uh, you know, finding value in your faith. And I honestly think that would be better for everyone too,
Yeah.
because it's that kind of intransigent commitment to certain ideas, I think, which is really, really poisonous
Well, like
for a lot of our culture.
fundamentalism leads to fanaticism. I
It
mean,
does.
um, but something that I talked about with a couple friends, and I wanted to ask you about is when you're looking back at the contemporary beliefs when the things were written. Um, was there this polytheism view to Judaism? Was there because it seems like there's multiple places where the Bible refers to it, but that maybe in the Jewish text it was a little more prominent.
Well, this is a very interesting question. Because the assumption for a long time has been that even though, straight up, uh, the Bible, the Old Testament at least, is a product of a Canaanite culture that we identify as Israelite, but it's all Canaanite. Um, it was a polytheistic culture, and you can still see a lot of that ingrained within the text itself, within the Old Testament. A lot of it's tried. There have been efforts to try and minimize and downplay that, I think, by later editors, as certain approaches to these polytheistic ideas change. So the expectation and the understanding for a long time was that in this period following the exile, which happened in 587 BCE, so from that time kind of moving forward into the 4th, 3rd, 2nd century BCE, the Jewish culture was becoming much more clearly monotheistic. There is only one God, and his name is Yahweh, kind of thing, and there's just nothing else. I think more recent work by scholars has been challenging that notion in interesting ways, and I kind of come back to. I come back to a couple things, and the Dead Sea Scrolls have actually really helped us in this regard, because there's a number of really, really interesting texts uh, in the scrolls. Actually, just give me a second. I'm going to grab a book because I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
read something, okay?
yeah, yeah.
No. It is this one. So, like, just to give you an example here, I'm going to read from something called the self glorification hymn. Now, I believe that this. Okay. Oh dear. They've got this reorganized in a way. Here we go. Okay. Now I believe that that this is a text written about a human being. But just listen to some of the ways this human being is described. It's fragmentary. So what's going to happen is, as I read here, there's going to be a lot of places where we're in the middle of sentences that don't really have a clear beginning or an end. But I think people will be able to get the sense of kind of what's going on here. He has done awesome things marvelously. In strength of his power, the just exult and the holy ones rejoice. In justice, he established Israel from eternity, his truth and the mysteries of his wisdom in all generations, and the counsel of the poor for an eternal congregation. There's breaks between a lot of these, right? Then it says something about the perfect ones, eternal, a mighty throne in the congregation of the gods, above which none of the kings of the east shall sit, and their nobles something. Then it switches to the first person, and it says, my glory is incomparable, and besides me no one is exalted, nor comes to me, for I reside in, and then there's a break, and it says something about the heavens. I am counted among the gods, and my dwelling is in the holy congregation. My desire is not according to flesh, but all that is precious to me is in the glory of something, the holy dwelling. Who has been considered despicable on my account, and who is compared to me in my glory? Who, like the sailors, will come back and tell? Who bears all sorrows like me, and who suffers evil like me? There is no one. I've been instructed, and there is no teaching comparable to my teaching. So, like, this is like, does that sound like? Does
It's
that sound?
acknowledging the others, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and kind of like there's this weird kind of, even in terms of how the speaker is situating himself relative to the gods, divine beings, to the one God. So like there's a lot of really interesting things like that you see in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's a common idea that's put forward now, has been for a number of years. You might have heard this term, two powers theology, is an idea that in early Judaism, and this is 3rd, 2nd, 1st century BC, 1st century CE. This idea that Yahweh was not just this singular God, this singular deity, but that there could be multiple different expressions of Yahweh, two powers. And some of this comes out in a text like Daniel chapter 7. If I won't bother looking it up or reading it, but this is a prophecy that Daniel, fictitious Daniel, has about the last days, and he sees at the culmination, at the climax of this prophecy, it says that he sees the Ancient of Days sitting on a throne, and then one like a son of man comes and presents himself before the throne. Now, the reason this is significant is because the one like the Son of Man is riding on the clouds. A lot of the language that's attributed to describing him in this text is very similar to language used throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible to describe Yahweh. So the thought was, well, this is like a little Yahweh, in front of a big Yahweh, the Ancient of Days. Now, remember, this is a text that was written in the 2nd century BCE. But what scholars have become much more comfortable with more recently is recognizing that the Ancient of Days, as described in this prophecy in Daniel 7, is actually does look very similar to an actual Canaanite god, and that Canaanite god is El. El is featured in Canaanite literature and also elsewhere in the Bible as the king of the gods. He's the great god over, all the gods. So in a way, and this is, even just as recent as 4 or 5 years ago, Michael Seagull wrote a book about Daniel, and he pointed this out. He's like, based on the ways in which this terminology is all functioning within this prophecy, let's get real here. Yahweh is presenting himself. Yahweh is the one like a son of man, and he's presenting himself before El, the Ancient of Days. And this is as late as the 2nd century. So all that to say, I think polytheistic ideology really continued to persist much later than we ever thought, and that a lot of these efforts to undermine polytheistic ideas and to reinforce this sense of Yahweh, the only God alone, and there being no other gods at all. I think these are really, really late ideas that are being projected backwards.
Yeah. Is it, and you may not know the answer to this, but was El represented by the bull?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and you'll see text. There are texts in. This is one of the reasons why the story of the golden calf
That's what I was getting at.
features a golden
Yeah.
calf. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a polemic. Yeah, the history of this is kind of interesting. Here's sort of how I think this happened. Just to kind of give you a snapshot. We know almost nothing about the kingdoms of Israel in the north and Judah in the south prior to around the 9th or 8th century BCE. We know almost nothing about them. We have little snippets of information. But as near as we can tell, the stronger kingdom was the kingdom of Israel in the north, in Samaria. This kingdom seems to have been founded by a figure named Omri, whose son was Ahab, who is famous in the Bible, right? He was, and this kingdom of Israel was named after the god El. It probably means something like strength of El, strength of the bull, strength of the great god. El was worshipped in Samaria. We also see some evidence that Yahweh was worshipped in Samaria. We don't know a lot about the worship of Yahweh in Samaria, but it looks like at this time, Jerusalem is like it's a military stronghold in the south. It's a much smaller kingdom. It's much less significant than the kingdom in the north. And what happens is that in the 8th century, in 722 BCE, the Assyrians come and they lay waste to Samaria. The people scatter. The Assyrians employed this policy of resettlement, where they would move large groups of people all over their empire, and this is part of a way to ensure that nobody is in a position to strike up a rebellion, and to try and homogenize everything into something that looked more like a monoculture. So this is how they did these things. The kingdom of Samaria ends. Lots of people fleeing out of Samaria who escaped the Assyrians come into Jerusalem in the south. It's the closest, largest center. The city of Jerusalem at this time, over a course of about 25 years, archaeologists are telling us, literally exploded in size. In the space of about 25 years, the population increased about tenfold. This is during the rule of Hezekiah, and it's at this time that I think lots of this tradition and this literature, and maybe even Yahweh worship itself ended up coming um, into Jerusalem. And then what happens is there is, in an effort to, well, because the Northern Kingdom is gone altogether, there's an economic power vacuum, and that's importantly at the same time, Assyria's got their own problems, so they become much more internally focused and less fixated on what's happening outside their own borders. So it's a perfect opportunity for the Judeans to start expanding their own interests in the area. And as part of this, they also start to kind of engage again in this anti-northern polemic, where they start denigrating and downplaying the old Israel kingdom as like this reprobate um, imposter. And a lot of this comes out in the literature, and I would say something like the stories about the golden calf in the book of it's either it's
Ex-
probably Exodus, isn't it? Shoot, I'm bad at this. Yeah, in the book of Exodus, I think some of this is repeated in the book of Numbers too, but a lot of this kind of stuff is all rolled up into that, right? Like the reason it's their bulls has a lot to do with the way that they're starting to polemicize against Ale worship in favor of Yahweh worship. It also has something to do with there's another really important story in 1 Kings chapter 13 of the first king of the north, the northern kingdom, setting up these bull sites at Bethel and at Dan. The text tells us these are actually shrines set up so that people don't have to go to Jerusalem to do what? To worship Yahweh. So
yeah.
they're allowed to worship Yahweh in these other places, right? But it's important that bulls are representations in all of these stories, because I think these are reflecting back on how much they're trying to get away from this old heritage, from the old El worship and the old religion.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's kind of like and that's one of the things that interests me about it, is just because you can see the cultural shifts going on
Yeah,
as you move through it. Like you
yeah.
can see the influence from this culture, and it kind of drops away, and then they start doing this other thing, and yeah, so
This is
that's why I
sexy,
was
right? This is exciting. I don't know. This is the kind of stuff I love, right?
yeah, yeah. No, and I think that whenever you get into like talking about the history of it and the value of it in that way, that it is really exciting and an interesting thing, because you really start to understand where a lot of um, modern cultural religion comes from, and how it developed over time, and what it's become now is almost unrecognizable from that.
So different. So
Yeah,
different. I mean, I actually, the opening words in the book I'm presently writing is, let's face it, religion is weird.
yeah,
And I think weirder than a lot of people even recognize, just because so many elements of religious experience and religious observant are so normative, right? Like they're just so deeply ingrained into the way that we do things that we just don't even ask questions about it anymore. But then we also have these expectations that religion now is exactly the same as what religion always looked like.
right.
And honestly, when you get into ancient religion, a lot of this stuff you just go, this is weird. This is weird.
Well, I mean, even with modern Christianity within the United States, for example, even over the last couple hundred years, they've shifted from the original three synoptics to John, and it's more of a Jesus is God thing, and it shifted a lot from then into the supernatural stuff more, and
Yeah.
um, so it went from more supernatural to less back to more, and
Well,
uh, At least in the writings, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So and even like when I try to teach this stuff, and as I'm currently writing about it, one of the things I'm working hard to emphasize is that you know, within the ancient world, certainly within the ancient Canaanite world and the early Israelite world, the sense of the world, like there was just the natural world, and it's hard for us to kind of grapple with that or even grasp it. But it certainly looks like they had this idea that there was the natural world and that the gods lived in it, were
Yeah.
part of it. They were very, very far away, and mostly inaccessible. Like they were out there and they were up there, right? But they were still part of this world.
Oh,
So
right.
it,
Yeah, like
and that's
the
why.
firmament that separates Earth from the heavens, right? Like
Well,
it was a place you just couldn't get there.
yeah, and I don't even know if it was considered like it was considered far away, but it was not like it was part of another dimension, or that there was this idea of it being spirit in the same way, or immaterial in the same way that we think about it, right? Some of this comes out really clearly in, there's a number of stories uh, in the Old Testament which have been, I think, incorrectly identified as so-called theophanies. Are you familiar with this term?
No.
This is a theophany, is where God comes and appears to people in the form of a man. So if you think about something like a famous story is just before um, the angels, the messengers of Yahweh, destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, they come and they visit Abraham, right? And it says, Yahweh was with them. It literally says Yahweh. Uh, think we need to discuss a YEC book with Kipp. Not enough f bombs. Oh, I'm sorry. I better. I've been kind of surly for a few weeks, so I've been
I heard.
I think I said it recently. I say fuck a lot more than I did more recently.
No.
So I'll try harder, Regios. I really will, to get the quotas up. So but the text literally says that Yahweh was there with Abraham, as along with these other two beings, these other two divine figures. Now, the tendency, because we've got this we're projecting backwards, right? The tendency is like, well, this is God appearing like a man, and my pushback on this always tends to be, no, this is the way the gods were physical.
Yeah.
Like they were part of this world. So when it actually tells us, like there's another delightful little story in, I think it's Genesis chapter 17, where it tells of Hagar fleeing from Sarah after she's been mistreated. It says that she arrives at a well, and Yahweh showed up. He walked up to her, and she, this was just these things are all presented like this just sort of happens every day,
Yeah.
right? Like they had this sense that you could just be encountering a god anytime you turn around, because they looked like people, they behaved like people. um they were just really big and really smart, and they had big feelings, which is why they would act irrationally and kind of capriciously every now and then. So the gods were just like people, but they were like supercharged people.
Yeah.
So you never know when you're gonna just run into a god and have a conversation. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the perspective we need to start having when we read a lot of these stories in the Old Testament, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a few places where God's described physically, like in
Oh
knocking
yeah.
on doors and walking and you know, different things that seem to
What
us.
does it mean to be created in the image of God?
Right? Yeah.
It just means we look like them.
Yeah.
I mean, it also means that we have lots of the same sorts of characteristics as them. But at the heart of it, that's what the language means. Like when you look this stuff up and when you dig through the literature, uh, it's what the words mean, y'all.
Yeah. So, Deconverted Man asked, what would be a major difference between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Bible translations we have? What English translation is worse versus best in that regard? It's kind of
Okay. So major differences between the Dead Sea Scrolls and modern Bible translations. We're fortunate that there are a number of modern Bible translations that have been incorporating more and more readings from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's good. And I would say, it's hard to qualify or express it as just a difference or a number of differences, except to say what happens is that there are texts that we have inherited have lots of errors in them, that have been corrected thanks to the Dead Sea Scrolls. For example, within the Book of Psalms, a number of the individual psalms are written as what are called acrostics. Acrostic poems are poems where every line begins with the same letter and they're in alphabetical order. There's a few of these where for a long time we recognized that something had dropped out because in the Hebrew text it would skip, uh, you know, it would skip a letter, um, and the Dead Sea Scrolls have helped us to reconstruct some of those missing texts. Um, some of the in some other places, a really really famous one that I talk about quite a bit is the text of Deuteronomy chapter 32 verses 8 to 9, and this plays into a lot of what we've been talking about already. It was understood by scholars that in Deuteronomy 32 8 to 9, this is a very very old text. Like even within the Bible, it's one of our earliest texts, and in this poem it tells of El Elyon dividing the nations and separating all the people according to the number of the Bible says the number of the son. Well, I'll start with the original. It says the number of the sons of the gods, right, or the number of the sons of God. Then it says Yahweh's portion, Yahweh's inheritance is his people. Jacob is his heritable property. Now, the only versions we had a couple versions of this particular text. The one that survives in the Masoretic text, which is the standard Hebrew version of the Bible, says instead of that Elyon divided the people according to the number of the sons of God, it says he divided them according to the number of the sons of Israel. So, this is a reading that's that survived for a long time, and we didn't have anything really to compare to it. In the Greek translation, it said he divided them according to the number of the angels. But now we have an actual copy of this song from the Dead Sea Scrolls that dates to pretty close to about 50 BCE, where it actually says he had divided the nations according to, or sorry, it says, he divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God. So I think like this is the sort of thing that you see where you have now tangible evidence of some of this polytheistic ideology that underlies the text of Scripture that we always kind of knew was there. But now we actually have some manuscripts to point to and to say, yeah, look at this.
are the sons of God identified anywhere? Like,
No, No.
Okay. Mm.
And the really frustrating thing is that one of the ways to think about this is that even at the earliest stages, in the earliest layers, when some of these earliest texts were being written, there's already a point at which Yahweh is kind of a big deal and becoming, the great God,
Yeah.
who is bigger than all the other gods. So there's not much reflection at all on while I believe, and we have very very little evidence of this. I do believe that there was a time when Yahweh was worshipped as part of the Council of El alongside other deities.
Right.
But we just don't have any direct evidence of that.
Mm.
We have some echoes which kind of allude to this, but even by the time those echoes were written down, this is an idea that's already in the process of being rejected by the writers. Um, yeah, there's some good academic literature on this. Mark Smith is a scholar who's written about this. So that's the kind of we're still sorry. I'm rambling on here in
No,
response to
no,
this
this
very
is
good
great
question.
stuff.
So but now so that's the kind of things that we see. Thanks to the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Bible, there's a whole chunk, like a whole paragraph of text from the book of First Samuel that has been added back into a lot of modern English translations thanks to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And to that end, the best English translation, um, uh, that's who is this guy?
Who is that guy?
I don't know who this is. This guy likes to follow me around everywhere, uh, and annoy me. So just kidding, Josh. I'm just amazed that the Dr. Bowen and his fabulous new beard found the time to step away from his 2,000 children to tune in. But that's pretty great that he did. So awesome. Good to see you, Josh. So in terms of modern translations, I mean I can tell you some ones that I would avoid. Maybe that's a better way to do this. Like
Yeah.
don't read the ESV, people. It's terrible. Don't read the NIV. It's pretty terrible. The King James version is really really old. So is the RSV. So is the NASB. Although that one is pretty good. I think the NASB is pretty good. That's the I think it's the New American Standard Bible. The academic standard translation is the New Revised Version, and there's a reader's version of that as well. That is quite good. It's not perfect, right? Like there's no such thing as a perfect translation except for mine. But that was a joke. It's so it you know it I would just say avoid some of those. Some that are kind of fun because they're different for us. When it comes to the Old Testament, I do like Jewish Publication Society, which is an English Jewish translation of the Old Testament. Again, all of these, it's not error free. It's got its own problems, but I kind of like it because it's a different flavor than what you're used to, and it's still a really good translation. Um, I for a long time I actually used the New Jerusalem Bible, which is a Catholic translation, for much the same reason. But any of these, I think you will do well with. And I'll just repeat: New American Standard Bible, New Revised Standard Version, um, Jewish Publication Society, New Jerusalem Bible. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. Awesome. Great answer. Um, so
Actually, Digital Hammurabi did make a very good point. Um, just come learn Hebrew, with me.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay. Oh, you want to put it up there? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That no, go ahead. Go ahead and say it, and I'll
Okay.
put his
Just
thing out.
just come read. Just come learn Hebrew with me, and you won't have to rely on translations.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to point that out. I was going to say, yeah, check out these two teaching Hebrew and introducing Hebrew to people and stuff, and
And
learn it that way.
I'll just say one thing about this because it's really exciting. Like, very often, although I think Josh's TikTok broke after all the nonsense that happened a couple weeks ago with that. But he and I used to hang out on there's like a long there's like a TikTok live hangout during the weekdays in the middle of the night and in the early morning called Arch Thinker. I think she's also on YouTube. But Josh basically recruited he recruited a ton of people from just this live because people were interested in what the text says. People wanted to know what's in the Bible. They're really excited
I
about
think
learning the languages. It's pretty cool.
I mean I was actively out looking, like even asking certain uh, Jewish people and Christians and everything else, and then they were like, "You're an atheist?" No, and you
Yeah.
know, trying to find some way to learn it, and
That's
I was
tragic.
I
That's
was to the
tragic.
point I was like, "Am I going to have to go pirate Rosetta Stone?"
And
But
listen, and I think too. I mean, I don't care who you are. I'll teach anyone, right? Uh, Inspiring philosophy. If you're you get inspiring philosophy watches your show all the time, right? So I'm if you're watching, dude, come on,
yeah,
I'll teach you Hebrew.
yeah.
You can
I,
do
I,
it.
well, I mean, I think that for both sides, the apologists and the atheists who have these conversations all the time, why not just give yourself another tool to have a more informed
Yes,
conversation? I mean,
yes,
um,
yes,
I I don't know,
and it's
but
fun.
I look forward to that, and we'll talk about it later. I'll get with you
Yeah, for sure.
because I would love to learn that. The uh, a really easy softball one here, and then we'll start to wrap up.
All right.
So, in the Old Testament, this idea of Sheol and hell
Mm,
and Satan isn't
mm.
isn't the same thing that Christianity carries forward, and it in no way resembles what it is now at all. Uh, hell isn't really like defined as a place, right? Or well, Sheol. In
I Sheol was a place. Sheol was under the ground, and it was dark and gloomy and kind of depressing. Um, but I think also really relaxing. But it was understood, and I think it's important for people to to recognize this. Um, it was where everyone went. Like you couldn't avoid this. Like this is just what happened when everyone died. They went to sleep in the ground, and then they just existed in this kind of dreary, uh, dark realm of nothingness, and they did nothing, right? Like I think that's just what it was just what the end of life was,
but
and
the idea of it being like torture and all that is just the
that's not
separation from
there.
God part of it, right? Like
I
there's
wouldn't. I don't even know if I don't even know if I wouldn't say that they understood this place in those terms either. Like I think the if the concept of separation from God would have been just completely foreign to them, no more separated from God than they would be just existing in the natural world. Because you'll remember, um, like the gods are out there, right? Like they're part of this world, but they're not always, but they're certainly not always among us. They might pop up here and there, but they're not here. There was a sense that, you know, the gods would live in their temples, which were, you know, their places in this world, on in this natural realm. So it was just the place that dead people went when they
Yeah.
died, and they just stayed there and left everyone alone. So and it was, yeah, it wasn't a punishment either, right? It was what it was. Like, you know, you couldn't escape it. You were going to go there. There's nothing you could do to change your circumstances when you got there. It's just, it had nothing to do with your virtue or your value or your standing in life. Like, it was just as yeah, it was just a transition from one form of existence to another.
Right. Right. So, just to be fair here, my the theist in the chat that usually trolls me, but asked a question. I will ask it just because you're playing nice today, so far. Uh,
I'm such a fucking nice guy.
yeah, is it
It's
possible
the
that the
Canadian in
Bible
me.
is just inspired by Jesus?
Well, I mean, I have a number of problems with this, and I'm going to be kind of pedantic about it. It really, really depends on what you mean by the Bible. Really depends on what you mean by inspired. I don't know what those words mean apart from a very, very long conversation with a person. I suspect I will continue to come back and say, no, it's not possible. And I would also sort of settle on this point I made earlier, that we know almost nothing about Jesus. He didn't write anything down. The stories that are told about him don't, I think, provide much of any traction to the idea that he had anything to do with creating the Bible.
Yeah.
So, but it's uh,
I guess there's a J-Dub view that may think that. I guess, but yeah.
I don't know anything about the JWs either. So
Right. Right.
I
Well.
my level of expertise is narrow,
Right. No.
and
And
I try to stay there.
so explain Mormons to me
Oh
now.
God, uh,
No.
yeah, you know, they're nice. I think I've met a few.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
They have big families. I don't know.
well, we'll roll this into the end here
Okay.
and get you out of here and stuff. I do appreciate you coming and answering some questions and hanging out. It's a laid back thing here, so there's. I'm glad that you were as thorough as you were, because it gives more context to those things. And again, it's better to talk about these things from a more informed position rather than a less. And there was things that I was, misunderstanding about it myself. So, great.
We can all learn and
And,
grow.
and I look forward to seeing you and Josh teaching Hebrew and stuff. And what you got? Anything else you're working on before we go?
Nothing imminent. There is my good friends Josh and Derek over at Myth Vision Podcast are doing a fundraiser stream for me on Thursday evening, so people can come and check that out. It's going to be fun. Josh and I are going to watch some parts of this recent Jubilee video featuring Alex O'Connor versus 25, an
I
atheist and
watched that.
25 Christians.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about a few things
Yeah.
that happened in that video. That'll be fun. And I know Josh really wants to say some, because he can't shut up about it. Josh really wants to say some things about biblical slavery too. So we'll probably do that as well. But yeah, come and check it out. It'll be fun. Thursday evening, I think 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, and we'll be on for a couple of hours.
And that's going to be on Nick,
And
isn't it?
I think there might be some other special guests involved as well.
Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Yeah. I stream on occasion. I might do one this week. I haven't really settled on anything. And there is a couple of other things coming. We did an interview with Amahai Mazar, who's a brilliant Israeli archaeologist, like a legendary Israeli archaeologist. It's on my Patreon right now. You can watch it there. That will be published at some point here in the month of February to YouTube for everyone. And then I will also be working on getting back to my long form series on the Dead Sea Scrolls at some point here in the upcoming months too. So yeah, keep your eyes open for that stuff.
Lots going on. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for all you do. I've seen you a number of places for years and have learned things from
Has it
you.
been that long?
And I've only been running around the Atheist YouTube channels for maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years, I guess.
Okay.
So
I feel like it's only been about that long for me too. So I don't know. But I don't know. What do I know? I'm old and my memory is poor. So.
Well, when I first got into like atheism, when I first was like, okay, I'm an atheist, the first thing I came across, of course, was Christopher Hitchens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent a good year or so just listening to and reading the books of Hitchens and Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss and all that stuff. And then I discovered Aaron Ra after that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had kind of a similar story as far as like, how our families were about it and the kind of environment we grew up with,
cool.
with theism being the way it was. So I related a lot to him and it was just a lot of everything I do here. I mean, I went to school for computer science. Everything I talk about is purely just stuff I've soaked up and I try to tell people, like, if you feel like you want to talk about these things, do it. Like, by all means, we should be talking about these things.
Absolutely.
So important to our society. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I appreciate all you do within the
Thank you.
community and the information that you put out there and the work that you do. It's awesome. It really is.
Thank
You and
you. I
Josh
appreciate
both. Watching you two together is a lot of fun too.
We try to make it fun. So, on that note, I will say one other thing too, because that is still coming. Josh and I we have recorded the final installment in our responses with Stephen Woodford at Rationality Rules to Inspiring Philosophy and the now disgraced Egyptologist. But so that that's probably coming at some point in the next few weeks or months. I don't know the timeline on that, but it's done. It's going to be out there. So,
Cool.
but I do like doing things with Josh. I think we complement each other well in terms of our style and the breadth of information that we're able to disseminate. So So there'll always be stuff with him.
Well, there's just all these contexts and details that, I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for another 2 or 3 hours at least. I mean, but we'll do it again sometime.
Okay.
But real quick, thanks everybody for coming. And
thank you.
If you're not subscribed to Dr. Kipp's channel, go over there and subscribe and follow him and Dr. Josh and the stuff that they do. And I want to give a thanks to my channel members and Patreon supporters. You guys are great, and I appreciate you supporting the channel. We'll do a member stream tomorrow around probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon or so, and hang out for about an hour or two and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. But thanks everybody for coming. Thanks you, Dr. for coming.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, no, my honor. This is probably just because I was an R and Raw fanboy for so long, of course, having him on was like a big thing for me, and having Matt Dillahunty come on was a big thing for me. You're like number 3 for me.
Oh, I'm blushing. Stop.
Just that's just the trip into this, the people that I come across and stuff, and it's like, okay, I learned that it's okay to be an atheist and all that, because where I live it's not okay. And then you get into learning all those things, and then you go looking for somebody who's giving you information, and I think the atheist community craves that information, like we really do, and it's great. But all right,
It really
thanks
is.
everybody. Have a great one. Catch you later.
Thanks. Bye.